All right, going to call this meeting to order. Mike, or Anthony, whoever wants to start this one. Solid Waste Services.
All right. For the work session, solid waste services is the first item. Of course, after that's board and commission discussion. But regarding the solid waste services, just a brief recap. We have the current contract that expires September 30th, I believe, of 2022. Contract requires giving notice so many days to either renew. It allows for 5 one-year periods renewal, or it also allows or requires a transition period if it's not to be renewed, if it's the council prefers to go out for bid. Just a recap for the public, as much as the council. The current contract allows 2 day per week curbside trash collection, the 1 day per week recycling. Originally, the contract had recycling bins as well as glass at the YMCA. The recycling bins, there were problems with contamination, trash getting dumped in those, so that was discontinued. However, the glass remains, but Ripple Glass has that container. Contract also allows 5 bulky items picked up once per month, yard waste once per week during season, and Christmas tree disposal, residential dumpster service is available, but that's at the resident's cost. And then, of course, Snake Saturday trash services. It does also, it includes all the city facilities and 3 churches. Originally, it was 4 churches, but only 3 now. The current contract has increased 2% annually. If it's chosen to be renewed by the council, it's the same. It's 2%. We have asked Jim's if that's even agreeable, because both have to agree to that. But just so you know, it is to Jim's disposal. We also have Sergio Moore with Jim's disposal with us for any questions. But basically, the kind of the contract options for your consideration or discussion tonight is renew the current contract at 2% or request proposals for 5-year. One thing I will add, the contract does allow for additions/deletions to the current scope, so to speak, but it does require agreement by both parties. But that is something that's allowed.
Perfect. So I would just say, leading off with that, I'd be in favor of extending basically the contract as is. If there's a top 5 thing you can mess up in a city, it's trash collection. And Jim's Disposal's done a fantastic job. We had some previous issues. I think I was the only one that's on council at the time with the previous vendor, and it's been night and day. A few issues with the can rollout initially, but once we got past the can rollout, I think they provided a great service, and I think for a 2%, a 2% increase, a 1-year extension would probably be a good thing for council to consider. But I do think we have further questions. Councilmember Smith.
So I appreciate you coming out. I've heard really nothing but good things about the service. I've enjoyed it myself, and I appreciate you coming out to the work session to answer some questions. Couple questions that I've got for you. Are there any other cities that you service that do 2 days a week trash collection? Okay.
If you could just bring your mic down a little bit too. There we go. Or closer. Or just want to make sure everyone at home can hear too. Thank you.
And do you know what it would save us if we moved to 1 day?
Right now, there currently would be no cost savings. It would just be better on the roads and the environment.
Okay, so it'd be the CO2 and the roads,
Yes.
no dollar saves. Okay.
Correct.
All right. Can you help me understand how the recycling is handled at this point? I know at the last work session, a couple guys came out and talked to us. They said there's been a lot of contamination, kind of misunderstanding of what goes into the recycling bins, and that sometimes that's leading to those end up in the landfill or they're not processed at the sorting facility. Can you help us understand how that's being handled?
That is true. So what happens is when we collect it, we take it to the processing facility. And then from there, they determine the contamination levels and whether if it goes to the landfill or if they continue to move it on for processing. to be a material that they can sell.
Okay.
So right now, the city is probably around 20-30% contamination
Okay.
as far as the recycling.
Do you recall, I don't know if you were here at that last conversation we had, I think 2 years ago or so. Do you recall what our contamination percentage was? Or maybe you weren't even around.
No, during that time, no, I don't.
Okay, I feel like it was a higher number than 20%, but
Yeah, I don't remember the exact, it might have been 35-40%.
at what point does it become waste, I guess, would be the follow-up to that.
Any form of contamination is waste.
I know, but where you have to dump like a whole load.
As far as, well, we just take it to the process.
No matter what, no matter how
what,
contaminated
no matter
it is,
what,
you drop it off.
We don't see, we
they
drop
take
it
care
off
of.
and then they take it from there.
Okay.
Do you know what contamination level that they're considering too much to sort, and they'll basically take the whole bin, take it
No.
to the,
I don't have that.
we don't know
information.
that? Okay. All right. As far as, we talked about other city facilities being able to use the service, how does it work with apartments? Do we have bins that are placed at the apartments, or is that at the expense of the
No.
apartment owner?
That's at the expense of the apartment owner.
Right, it's just 2 to 4
Okay.
unit
Okay, so it's
apartments or complexes.
residential
Family,
units, 1 to
yeah.
4? Okay. And then the only complaints that I'd pass along to you is the bins, the very bottom of the bins, if something's not bagged necessarily, is not, or even if they're in like smaller bags, are not getting fully emptied. So sometimes the guys will reach in and pull the bag out rather than like dumping it in. So that's one thing I hear. And then the other one was placement of the bins after they've dumped them. They kind of end up back in the middle of the sidewalk, which sometimes are placed in the middle of the sidewalk by the resident. But if the guys could, or the girls who are picking it up, could put it back off the sidewalk. Just want to pass those along.
Okay. You look like you had something. Councilmember Graves.
Yeah, just a couple things. First of all, I appreciate the comment about the fact that we're the only municipality with 2-day-a-week trash pickup. I would like to keep it that way. I think it's awesome that we have the best services in the metro area, and why not remain that way? I don't think that we should lower our standards to meet our surrounding neighbors. And then second of all, to the point about recycling being contaminated, I agree with that 100%. I went to it was actually an NKC Business Council presentation, and there was a recycling outfit there. I wish I could remember the name off the top of my head. Help me out, Saper, if you think of it. But there's a lot that I didn't know about what to put in recycling and when not to put in recycling. So moving forward, I guess to be proactive, how do we engage the community and get our standards better for what we're putting in the recycling bins? Like, I think we need an education. I don't think people mean ill. I think that people are just, and myself included, even stuff, I'll just give you a couple, small examples. Like, there's certain items that are recyclable, but the lid is not, for example. Paper towels are not recyclable. If you have a pizza box and it has melted cheese all over it, it needs to go in the garbage if it has food waste on it. You really need to rinse items out. Like, if you have a can of beans, you can't just throw the can in there with a bunch of residue. You need to rinse it out. So I don't think people necessarily mean bad, and they're making mistakes just out of lack of education. So I think we need to focus on, increasing. I don't know if that's putting something on social media or the NKC Connection magazine or what have you, but I think we should focus on that.
Thank you. I know we've done it in NKC Magazine before. I think we've done some social media outreach on that as well after last time Jim's came and presented, because I think that was came a suggestion from you guys was, better educating people on what they can put in. But yeah, certainly something we can look at to make sure we're still getting the message out. Can you say that contamination percentage one more time that we're at?
In between 20 and 30%.
In between 20 and 30, okay. Because obviously you do some sort of education piece. You want to have some sort of, baseline. That's going to be interesting to probably go back and see what we were, 2 years ago before we sent out the newsletter. Councilmember Bailey, we'll get back over here.
Does any other city split, residents split their own recycling into, aluminum, plastic and et cetera, or does everybody always just put it in one bin?
Just one bin.
Councilmember Smith.
So I'm in favor of renewing the contract. You've done a great job. Is there a way we could get the info on what the sorting facility is accepting? Because that's kind of an important number where if we are going through all the effort of putting in recycling and educating the public on how to sort it, which we did do social media and the newsletter, people did save copies of that. But if we're doing all that, and it's still going to be eventually in the landfill because, say, the sorting facility has a 5% max standard or a 10%, or down the line from them, they send it to, I don't know who the end user is, if it gets shipped overseas, and they have an even higher standard. At some point, is this just going to end up in a landfill one way or another? And I don't know who we would need to ask, like if we could get information from the sorting facility so that at the next contract discussion, we would know further up the chain how that's running. That would just be useful information to have.
Yeah, we can get you that information.
Appreciate you.
Okay, so if there's one thing I guess I want to ask council, something that's been brought up to me for a couple years now is a consideration for curbside composting. Would that be something council would be interested in exploring any, or no interest whatsoever? Councilmember Graves.
Yeah, that's actually probably the same people that talk to me. We have a couple of people in Ward 1 that are interested in doing the composting, and I actually did some research on that. I met with Director Sands about that many months, like that was right when you got hired probably. And come to find out, the city actually dabbled in that many years ago, and it didn't work out. It turned out, and please jump in, like I'm just kind of recollecting our conversation from like Pat Hoover days at Public Works. They tried composting, and it was very intensive for the Public Works to kind of manage. There was also kind of low involvement. There wasn't a lot of community involvement in the situation. And I think moving forward, kind of the conclusion I ended up coming to in researching that was one of two ways it would have to be done. Either we would need a group of community members to become, kind of take charge and take the lead and be volunteers to kind of run the situation. Or plan B would be there is a company that does composting, and they'll give you a little bin, and you have to pay a subscription fee into that service. And so I thought perhaps the city could do a, what do you call it, subsidy, and say, like, if you want to, join the composting service, we'll pay half your subscription fee if you want in, something of that nature. But as far as Public Works was concerned, they've tried it, didn't pan out.
No, and I mean, I've seen some, I think the same sites that you've seen where someone comes out and essentially just swaps out a bucket for you. So that'd be a third-party service. I wouldn't expect that to be a thing we're putting on Public Works, or I don't even think, do you do that anywhere else with Jim's Disposal?
No.
Okay, so that'd have to be another, but since we're talking about trash and such, I thought I'd bring it up. But yeah, I think you'd have to have a third party come and do that.
Any conversation with the Y about it, the greenhouse?
I have not talked to the Y about it. I just know it's randomly come up a few times. I know some people take them down to, I believe, Big Rip now.
Yep.
I'm not sure where else, but Councilmember Clark.
In my experience with like Bridging the Gap and other organizations that deal with kind of recycling, and one is like try to always use any of your plastic at least more than once. So any kind of like to-go meals and things that come from cluster truck or surrounding areas, try to use that more than once. But the other piece is potentially, since we're sending it out in newsletters, we're already spending the money, is to maybe do like I've seen it be somewhat successful to put in like a sticker that you can either put on your trash bin itself or inside your bin at home that says exactly what can go in that bin, and everything else has to be discarded to your trash. And it's just like a visual reminder, and that could be something helpful, for community members. That's pretty permanent. No questions, but that's kind of my 2 cents there. But otherwise, you guys do a great job. Yay.
Perfect. I think that's pretty low cost. How many bins do we have in town right now? There, I'm putting you on the spot here. Do you know your route?
About 3,000.
There's about 3,000 bins? Okay. I have no idea what a sticker costs, so if someone has a...
Would it be all right to sticker the bins? I don't know if those are ones you guys retain.
We have tried that in the past. That's something we could look
Okay.
into.
Or like a fridge magnet or something.
Perfect.
We can work with them on that as well.
There we go.
Yeah.
Great.
And
Councilman, sorry. Did you have something right then? Okay,
Yeah.
Councilmember Sager.
You've tried it in the past. How did that work out?
Well, the elements, if you put a sticker on plastic, they come off, they fade, and then what's accepted, the material that's accepted at the processing center changes. So that's one thing you have to look at too as well.
Yeah, I
Councilmember
think
Clark.
my thought was more inside. just inside your home, wherever you're keeping. I mean, me in particular, I have specific bins, and you know, you have a
Yeah.
trash area in your home and a recycling area in your home. You just kind of have a little reminder there, not exposed to the elements.
We'll just repeatedly send it out over Textcaster. Councilmember Graves.
Yeah, just following up with Saper, you're in the industry. Do you have any ideas that, I mean, that we haven't thought of as far as like bettering our recycle, contamination numbers? Like do you have any, if you don't, that's cool, but do you have any suggestions where you're like, you guys should do this?
Well, you can educate your population, your city as much as possible, but sometimes we're just lazy and we just toss it in. It's extra effort that will require on the resident.
Some people are uneducatable. I can relate to that.
So compared to some of your other cities, how are we on contamination percentage?
You're one of the good ones.
Oh, there we go. Councilmember, there we go. Sorry. That was Councilmember's question. Okay, further questions, comments on this? I've heard no opposition to a one-year renewal.
All right.
Take it as that.
Staff will work
Contract,
with
yep.
the city councilor and with Jim's and bring back a contract prior to the expiration of the current one, and unless we hear otherwise between now and then.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up, I'm going to call on Councilmember Saper for boards and commissions discussion. Councilmember Saper.
You've all had my thoughts on the topic and my ideas and the positions that I've taken. What I'd like to do is hear yours and get some discussion and see where we can go with this, and if we need to go anywhere with it. How, if we do, how?
It's been a little while.
I
Can
can-
you refresh us on your stance?
Yeah, everybody should have it available to them, but I can just read it out loud for those who haven't had a chance to read it. We want and need our board and committee members to have a strong interest where they serve, have background and knowledge compatible with the purpose of the board committee, and a sense of how that assignment serves the overall North Kansas City community. Boards and committees have different learning curves, how to best function, carry out the purpose of each board committee. That takes time. How much time is a question? This North Kansas City governing body established the Equity and Inclusion Committee in 2020, clearly stating, the City Council seeks to ensure that North Kansas City is a community committed to sharing values of diversity and inclusion in order to achieve and sustain excellence and valued growth and improvement of the city. And the City Council finds and concludes that a climate of diversity, inclusion, and equity is critical to the continued growth and progress of North Kansas City. And that, taken together, those values are recognized and supported fully by the city's leadership, and the City Council recognizes that the responsibility for diversity, equity, and inclusion lies with the entire community, including elected officials, city staff, citizens, businesses, and visitors to the city. That includes boards and committees. Both equity and inclusion absolutely requires us to bring as many residents as possible into an active participation in our civic life. The Citizens Academy that's underway is a good example of that. And that is where the conflict comes in between strong, functioning boards and committees and our commitment to inclusion. Having board committee members serve extended periods of time does, in some ways, enhance the operation and effectiveness of boards and committees. But that also excludes many others from them. Some have served many decades. It denies those boards, committees, fresh looks, concerns, and perspectives are being brought to them with new members. It locks out broader citizen participation in our civic life. The question is how to balance longevity and experience with inclusion. One term of 2 or 3 years is too little to achieve all the positives that experience brings. 20-plus years is an anathema to the idea, spirit, and letter of inclusion that this governing body has committed itself to. Some boards and committees have established their own formal or informal term limits. In the case of the library board, members can serve 3 consecutive 3-year terms. That can serve as a model for all our boards and committees with adjustments up or down in terms of number and length of service for particular ones. We can balance boards, committees' experience with our publicly stated commitment to the broadest possible equity and inclusion in our civic life. Now we have no policy or procedures except what a few individual boards have established, such as the library board. I think we need to go beyond that. And I'd like to hear others' opinions.
There you go. I would quickly note, on the library board, that's actually state statute. That wasn't set by our own library here. And just to run over some stats real fast on this, I mean, turnover is happening on boards. So looking at the ones that meet more frequently here, the hospital board, I mean, 6 of their members are under 5 years. 5 of their members are over 5 years. And that's the heaviest over 5 years. 5 years is an arbitrary number, but it seemed like some sort of benchmark here. The library has 6 members over 5 years and 6 under 5 years and 3 over 5 years. Then you get to Parks and Rec, which has 6 that are under 5 years and 3 that are over 5 years. Planning Commission gets even thinner, where under 5 years is 4 and over 5 years is 1. TIF, under 5 years is 4, over 5 years is 2. The IDA, they're all under 5 years. So turnover is happening. And there's really only, I think, 2 people touching on 20 years of service. One is, which is in here in the crowd, I believe. There we go, Liz Ryan, who said 21 years on the Parks Board. And then Rebecca Welburn's the other longest tenured person. Once you get down to that, there's a few in the 10 years, but there's quite a bit of turnover happening in newer members on these boards.
Overall, we're in pretty good shape overall, but we have no policy or position that we've stated. And in lieu of not having any policy or position, it's wide open in the future. And again, in terms of equity and inclusion, which we have committed ourselves to, stating a policy for that reason is good government in our part.
All right. Councilmember Roberts.
So I think I said this before, but I think generally speaking, I like the idea of term limits, but when we come down to things like a volunteer board and not elected officials, that's where I'd kind of change my perspective, because we're talking about volunteer time, not elected time. These are people that are just straight up donating their time. And when you talk 20 years, that is an incredible amount of time, I think, and an invaluable amount of time. But I don't know if we necessarily have negative things when we have volunteer boards. If we were talking elected officials, people up here for 20 years, that's where I 100% agree. And that's when things do get maybe lazy or negative or conflicts of interest because they're elected officials. But it'd be like saying we should fire all city staff that are here for over 5 years because we need change just for change's sake. I think volunteers should be allowed to volunteer for however long or as little as they like. And I think city staff should be able to stay here and retire. I think that's what we want, I think, in these boards. And as the mayor stated, I think we're getting a relative healthy amount of turnover. I mean, 5 years, people are probably about ready to turn over because that's I don't know if we could find stats or build stats over the last 20 years, how often people are dropping off boards. Seems like a time suck, but I'm guessing semi-often.
We got a lot of things going on. I'm not sure that's the project.
Semi-often. I think we have better things to worry about here, but it's a volunteer board. I think we haven't had any hiccups. There's not, as far as I know, no big issues. We'll use our time more efficiently elsewhere. That's my 2 cents.
Just to kind of add to the appointments, someone's going to call me on this. I may have missed numbers. I did this real fast running through minutes. But of like my appointments so far, 13 have been people that are new to boards and 11 have been reappointments. So, I try to balance that as well. That's all hand over here. Councilmember Clark.
Oh, I'm losing my thought. It's coming back.
There we go. Councilmember Palumbi and then Councilmember Clark. There you go. Oh, you got it?
Okay, I'll go. kind of what Adam said. The other thing, let me backtrack. Anthony, I think it's great that you want to bring this up because I do see where you're coming from, and I do understand that, you know, equity and inclusion is something we want to be a part of. But kind of like what Adam said, it is a volunteer position, and you can't necessarily force people onto these volunteer boards just because we want to see new faces and new ideas. So I would actually be in favor of having like an apprenticeship or like almost like a pro temp position for these people who want to join these boards, because a lot of them, you can't just join a hospital board if you've never had any experience with something like that. So it's a hard thing to just kind of push yourself into, because if you don't understand the inner workings of a large organization such as that, it's a lot to ask of somebody to take on something like that as a volunteer position. I think it's similar with the Parks Board. There's a lot of learning to do when you take on one of those positions, and you can't really do it if you've never been to a meeting, if you've never really had a lot of volunteer opportunity to see the inner workings of, you know, what it's really going to be like to be on these boards. So I would be in favor of having newer faces and newer people almost be mentored into an upcoming position, as opposed to getting rid of really quality candidates who've dedicated all this time and effort into, you know, promoting the change that we've seen in the city, as opposed to just replacing them because, you know, we want to see someone fresh and new up there.
Councilmember Clark.
Yes. To go back on my idea like a couple months ago of like the mentoring, I think has to exist, because if you're brand new to a board, it does take a while to catch up, to even know what's going on, what the processes are, and then you're 6 months in, you've maybe had only 6 total meetings because it's once a month. I think, you know, when people really want to be on boards or considered for boards, if they've already established relationship, great, but mentorship or like also showing up and volunteering for events. I mean, there's Arts in the Park this weekend, and there's all sorts of opportunities, and maybe making those more accessible for people to volunteer. And then, yeah, I think we can talk to the individual boards to kind of say, what are you guys open to? Or we establish a policy that says, hey, you know, at least 2 to 3 times a year, let's have maybe a member of the Citizens Academy that's expressed an interest, or they're at least exposed to what goes on, you know, with like parks and all these different areas. We're making great strides, I think, to head in that direction so that people are exposed, they know what's going on. But the more they can get an idea of how things work and then be able to be in a position to say, hey, I've attended this many meetings or volunteered this many hours, I'm in huge favor of still pushing for that mentorship.
Kind of to your point overall of having tenured people, I mean, I think that is important, because when you have someone new come in, the whole ship's not sinking. When that new person comes in, they can take a year to learn. They can take a year to get ready, because the more tenured people are going to continue to be able to carry those boards along. Councilmember Graves.
Yeah, I want to echo what they just said regarding volunteering. I talked to somebody this week about this topic here in the community, and heard an interesting story. Well, first of all, Arts in the Park is still looking for volunteers. So if you are interested in Park Board, please step up and volunteer. And then to relate a little story about the Citizens Academy. Citizens Academy, I'm told, met, you know, with Parks Board, and the Parks Board people were showing them all the stuff that they do. And there was someone there at the Citizens Academy that had applied for the Park Board. And once she actually saw what they do, she was like, I don't want to be on the Parks Board anymore. And so I do think that volunteering is helpful for a number of ways, just to get your feet wet, also to acclimate yourself with the people on that board, because I do believe that the mayor seeks input when there is an opening. You know, he might check with people on that board, and if they say, you know, so-and-so has been volunteering, they're really good, they would be a good fit, that would be great. And then I wanted to bring one other thing up that the mayor and I have talked about, both on and off the record, that he has dedicated himself to, which is, I know when I took office on city council, there were certain people that, and don't take this the wrong way, because I love volunteers, like these people are giving their time. But we did notice, and we talked about how there were people, a handful of people that were on multiple boards. Like there was literally, like, I don't know, 5 people that were on. Some of them were on 3 different boards. And that's great that they want to volunteer that time. But we talked and we thought, you know, this would be an opportunity that perhaps when their time lapses, you can go to them and say, hey, I'm thankful for your service. What's your favorite board? instead of being on 3 boards, maybe pick 1. And I will also point out that there's 2 boards that are very similar. What are they, Mayor?
TIF and the IDA.
And IDA.
Yeah, there's a strong overlap there, yeah.
And so there are people that are on those 2 boards, and I'm told, like, yeah, they don't meet very often. There's a lot of overlap. It makes sense to have kind of the same people on those boards. So that is something that I have seen firsthand. I haven't always agreed with the mayor on boards appointments, but that's something that he has been doing, is when someone's terms lapses, if they're on 3 boards, he's been filling, one of those spots with someone fresh. And we're also trying to spread it out, not only to new people, but I know the mayor's also looked into what wards people are in.
Yeah.
Because there was a big discrepancy. There was 2 wards. I think one is where I live, and the other one was what?
1 and
2?
2, 1 and 2.
Yeah, where a vast majority of the board people were from just 2 neighborhoods, and then wards 3 and 4 were vastly unrepresented. And so, I think we are making progress. I don't really necessarily agree with term limits, but yeah, people want to get involved. There are volunteer opportunities, and so yeah, I've talked long enough.
And I do tell people, to your point of being on multiple boards, I have no problem someone resigning from a board to jump on another board. Either you see a board you'd rather be on, there's an opening now, you can jump on the opening now, and we'll try. Would you be okay dropping that one later to join this one if an opening comes up? And a lot of times it's yeah. So always looking at things like that too. Okay, further conversations. You have any closing?
Thank you for all this input at this point. Points well made. However, we're doing well now, but it's just because of the current people that are here and the current staff that we have. This can change in the future, and it may very well change. We don't know. But what I would like to see maybe is just we create a policy that says essentially what we've been talking about today, that we encourage and want as much diversity as an involvement of the citizens of North Kansas City in the civic life. And we've been doing that. We're doing that, but we don't really have any kind of official policy statement. And just, again, leave it up to the individual boards to discuss among themselves if they want to have any term limits. I don't know that they can necessarily do that without any kind of authorization from the city.
I'm hesitant to look back there and ask Tom. Barzy, he's ignoring me.
He's doing Wordle.
If I could get this in a yes/no answer. We're tracking well on time here. Can other boards and commissions even set? Do they have the statutory authority to set term limits? Boards and commissions, non-library boards and commissions, do they have the statutory authority to enact term limits? Okay. So from their perspective, obviously we still take on a policy knowing that and keep trying to go in that direction.
And
Obviously, the
if we
direction
have
we're
a
in,
stated policy, of course, then the mayor in his appointment power
Yeah.
could actually
Yeah, yeah.
accomplish that. And in some ways, you've been doing that by appointing new people, and the turnover has been good, and it's been expanded. But we don't know what will happen 5, 10
That's correct.
years from now. And that's why if we can come up with some kind of policy statement, it would help sort of enshrine that for the future.
Agree. All right. So I think, are we good for now? And can we keep that in mind and work on
It's
maybe
an
considering a policy or
ongoing
something?
project.
Yes.
And I wanted to
Perfect.
get everybody's input and feelings about it, and I've learned more.
I appreciate you bringing it up again. Any final words in closure here?
That's it.
All right. Then with that, your fingers on the mic. No? Okay. With that, we adjourn.